Welcome to the Diary of Discovery, the podcast where we delve deep into the human experience of healing and transformation. I'm your host, Jacky, and each week we will sit down with inspiring individuals who have embarked on their own personal journeys of healing and self-discovery. From overcoming trauma to navigating life's challenges, our guests share their raw and honest stories, offering insights, wisdom, and hope to all who tune in. So grab your favorite cup of tea, find a cozy spot, and join us as we uncover the power of resilience, courage, and the pursuit of authenticity. This is the Diary of Discovery. Amazing. Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. I am super excited to welcome yet another incredible guest. So, do you want to tell everyone who you are and where you are in the world?
Sure thing. So I am David Francis. I'm in the northeast of England. I live on the coast, a town called South Shields. And I have multiple roles, I guess, which we might dig into. But the thing that I'm really focusing on right now is trying to support people and help them build unshakable self-belief. So kind of recognizing their unique gifts, their unique brilliance, build a life they love, and share their magic with the world.
I love that. Oh my gosh. Okay. So let's start at the beginning of your journey. Everyone who listens to the podcast know this is always where we start. So take us back to where you realized that something had to change, like life couldn't continue as it was. Like what was going on for you at that time?
Yeah, so there's probably been a few of those moments throughout throughout the journey, if I'm perfectly honest. I guess the first one of those. It goes back 20 plus years now, but I had, I guess, what you would call a breakdown at some point, and I made some changes then, and things have been a bit up and down over the years before that, and then since that, and then I've I spent probably my teens and twenties with kind of low levels of self-belief, low levels of confidence. And I felt like I was just reacting, I guess, to the world around me rather than creating my own path. So it was very, feeling like a bit powerless, a bit disempowered, a bit like a victim of circumstances, various things that had happened to me through the years. Um, and and then I decided to try and switch that around, and I got into kind of trying to really prove myself to myself, prove myself to other people, prove my worth through kind of striving and achieving and all of that stuff. So I think I probably went from like a high potential underachiever to an overachiever maybe. And then I realized that because I'd taken on so many different roles, trying to do all of the stuff, I got to a stage where I felt like I was not doing any of the things well, and I was failing on multiple fronts. I wasn't there for my wife and my family. I felt like when I was at work, I should be resting. When I was resting, I felt like I should be at work. I had kind of a couple of different work roles because I had a day job and then I had this community leadership role as well. And I kind of felt like there was no escape from it all. And it sounds dramatic to say like this standard thing of like everything came crashing down around me, but I just realized that like this wasn't sustainable, this wasn't working. And the worst part of it was all my own doing. No one had asked me to do these things. I'd gone out and pursued them, so I'd kind of created this problem for myself that I needed to get out of. So I guess, and timeline wise, we're probably talking like 2019, 2020. And then of course, 2020, everyone knows what happened in 2020. So at that time I was, and I still am, leading a team of people whose income and livelihoods was kind of who knew what was going to happen there. So that whole time, 2019, 2020 was a difficult time. But in a way, I'm grateful for it because through those challenges is kind of how you grow. And I don't think I'd be where I am now without the challenges that I've kind of dealt with along the way.
Oh, absolutely. I love it was all your own doing. I feel like for so many people who are in that kind of low confidence, like they do end up spiraling to the other side
Mm-hmm.
and then creating that mass of doing to try and like feel that worthiness.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're just like, this is too much. Like, what have I done? Why
Mhm.
have I done this? So I think that that's a really interesting thing. I think so many people will be able to identify with that and kind of like feel into like what that was
Mhm.
like. And I guess like as you were going through this process and you were kind of noticing this like underachieving to this overachieving and like, you know, these kind of different stages of this journey, what did you have to like learn about yourself or like embrace about yourself to actually start this healing journey and like potentially multiple times? So, like, what did you have to learn about yourself in the underachieving space that made you become overachieving? And then what did you have to learn in the overachieving space to let you sort of become restful and give yourself a bit more space again? Like, how has that journey been?
Wow. So there's a lot there. I'll try and remember all of that. But if I go back in time then to the what we're calling the underachieving years, I think like growing up, I was somebody who uh, I was. I guess I was told maybe that I was gifted, that kind of thing. Told that I was bright and all that stuff. I'm not sure I even believe that that's a thing, really necessarily. But that's too long to talk about now. But so I was kind of told that, but I felt like there was high expectations on me. Whether that was real or not, who knows? I suspect it was more internal than anything anyone else really. Like my perception anyway as a child was there was high expectations and you needed to work hard and do well, improve yourself and all that. But I just felt a bit disengaged. There was stuff that had happened through my youth that probably contributed to that, and I kind of felt like I was drifting through my teenage years. And there was a couple of people who really helped me and showed that they believed in me and my potential. And in particular, a couple of music teachers that I had, and I ended up going into music and music education. Um, and I felt that, I guess, I can't think how to really put it, but I guess the analogy would be I felt like the chess piece rather than the chess player, or maybe I was an extra in somebody else's film rather than the writer of my own story, if that makes sense. So anything that I ever did was just in response to somebody offering me an opportunity or asking me to do a thing. It was never about me going out there and trying to find what I actually wanted for myself. So, being a kind of gigging musician, for example, a lot of it is just, well, for me, because I didn't know how to play the game. It was kind of, working hard at playing music, and then hoping that somebody would ring me up and offer me some work, which did happen, more and more actually. So I kind of did okay with that attitude, and then I had this realization, and I'm not sure where it came from, that in the same way as I had learned over the years to practice playing music and practice a musical instrument, well, I could take that same approach and practice all kinds of other things, other skills. I could learn other stuff. And it was kind of like realizing that it's just a story when we tell ourselves, I'm the kind of person who dot, 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 or I'm not the kind of person who does this. You can be whatever kind of person you decide to be, and you can pursue a path for yourself. And as soon as I kind of had that realization, that's when things really started to change in terms of my work life, the creative life that I had as a musician as well. And suddenly I was kind of like going from waiting for other people to call me to setting things up and being the one who was calling other people and organizing this, that, and the other. And then I got into kind of really interested in coaching and leadership and mindset stuff, which really helped me in my work as a musician and as a music educator in particular, working to help other people learn music and get the best out of them, kind of unlock their potential. Um, and then that led into kind of leadership in terms of work positions of responsibility, like management leadership stuff and all that. So I kind of learned how to kind of forge my own path, create a vision for my life, and start to practice the skills and learn the stuff that I would need to know to get there. As I say, just in the same way that I would have once sat practicing the guitar or practicing the drums or practicing the piano, just practicing those new skills. And that was really kind of um, empowering because I realized I had agency and I had the ability to make changes in my life, and I didn't have to just settle with how things were. I could kind of go out there and make things happen. Um, but I guess the real problem there, and I'll try and transition to the second half of the question, is if you are using things out there to try and fix a problem in here, that's never going to work. You can never get enough of the externals to fill a void that's internal. And so the shift that's happened for me in much more recent years, since that kind of 2019, 2020 time that I talked about, was the realization, and this is where I'll start to get a little bit cosmic, so forgive me for that in advance. If you're not into this stuff, fine. But I realized that whoever you are or whoever you aren't, and whatever you've done or whatever you haven't done, you are inherently worthy of love. And you're kind of worthy of your place on the earth. You don't have to prove that by going out and doing anything or achieving anything. And so, in the same way that you wouldn't expect a newborn baby to do something to earn its place in the world or to earn your love, a newborn baby is inherently of worth and value. And so if I couldn't quite get to thinking that about myself now, it's like, well, there is that kind of inner child within me that is worthy of that. But realizing that I was kind of worthy already was a big thing. And it wasn't like an instant process where somebody just told me once, well, you're worthwhile, and I went, okay, fine, move on. This took like quite a period of time to come to terms with. And that, I guess, is the real thing that I kind of think's been a turning point, is recognizing that if you feel whole in yourself, yes, you can still go out there and do all of the cool stuff, but you kind of don't need it to feel okay. And it then becomes about just kind of enjoying the adventure of life and seeing all that it has to offer, rather than feeling a need, a dependency on the external validation to kind of prove yourself.
Oh, absolutely. I literally wish it was as easy as somebody just saying, you're worthy, and then you just feel like, how good would that be if that was the healing journey? Oh my gosh. But I completely agree. Like that process, and it's quite interesting because my childhood was actually like quite the opposite, but also quite the same. So I have dyslexia. I really struggled in school,
Mm,
and there was always this expectation that I just wouldn't be good at it. So like there wasn't a high expectation in the sense of like you've got to
mm,
get really good marks. And like all of my outside, there's four of us. All of my other sisters are super academic, like super smart, like ridiculous.
mhm,
And there was this expectation, like they had to get like A's. And if they got like X many A's on their report card, then they would get like their allowance. And
mhm.
I had to get like C's. And I got the same thing. And I absolutely see why it was done because, my dad was trying to absolutely say, like, I see where you're at and I'm making this fair for everybody.
Mhm,
But
mhm,
actually, the reverse of that was me feeling like, well, there's no point in me even trying
mhm.
because I'm never going to be able to like live up to what everyone else can do. And it was like almost had like the complete opposite effect because I was just like, what's the point?
Mm,
And I think like it's so interesting because like now as an adult, I can look back at that and go, I can absolutely see what he was doing. I can absolutely see that he was trying to make it fair. Like if he had said I had to get A's, I would have literally never gotten oh my God, like it just wouldn't have happened. But at the same time, it's so interesting that internal conversation that you end up having with yourself and how that then stays with you, even though the person who was on the other end was like trying to do something really good,
yeah, yeah.
it still has that like psychological like impact, doesn't it?
There's a really interesting concept. Um, there was apparently, I've not read the paperwork, but I've heard about this through multiple sources. There was a study done around what they called the Pygmalion effect in education. So George Bernard Shaw's Pygmalion, which was then the kind of inspiration for My Fair Lady, and this idea that in education terms, the theory was that they had a set of teachers and they told them that these particular classes that they were teaching were full of really high potential young people that they thought would do really well. And so the teachers approached them as if they were full of potential high achievers that were destined for greatness, which you could argue, and so is every child, but that ruins the story. So they were told that these specially selected groups of children that had demonstrated high potential, that they were likely to be high achievers, and that the outcome was that's exactly what happened. And then they told the teachers after the fact, actually, these were just a randomly selected group of children and young people. But because you were expecting them to do well, the way you viewed them was different. And so what you provided for them by way of your guidance and support and education was different. And that allowed them to flourish. And it's kind of, there's an old, I think it's in Dale Carnegie, about give somebody a reputation to live up to, that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
There's somewhere else that was, oh yeah, that's the other thing I was going to say about this. I reread on Monday this week, Monday, Tuesday, a book that I'd kind of forgotten about. And I can't remember what made me dig it off the shelf, but it's a book by a orchestral conductor called Benjamin Zander. And there's a great TED talk online that you can see with him as well. But in his book, he talks about when he was teaching an undergraduate class at a music conservatoire in the States, New England, I think. And when he got his intake of students at the start of the academic year, he would say to all of them, you're starting this year with an A. You've already got an A. All you need to do is keep it. And he would have them do an exercise where they had to write, dear Professor Zander, the reason I ended the year with an A is because ... And then they had to kind of do that bit of work in advance. So he was saying to them, like, you've already got the greatness there. You just need to kind of live into it. And I quite like that idea. It's like a less pressured version of you must get an A, you must work hard. It's like what you think is already yours, you kind of protect and cling on to and defend. More strongly than you go out and try and get things, if that makes sense. So if you already see it as yours, you're going to defend and protect it. And I would say that applies to your limitations as well. If you think you've got limitations, you'll protect and defend, or excuses, whatever you want to call it, you'll hang on to that tightly as well. So there's kind of an interesting parallel there with learning to let go of the things that are maybe holding you back, and kind of adopting that new mindset, that new identity of somebody who already is worthy and great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to say, like, very similar to that, like the concept of you already having the A, if
Mm.
you already believe that you're worthy,
Mm-hmm.
it changes the way of how you approach the world
Yeah,
and
yeah.
how you approach opportunities. And
Mm-hmm.
something that always stands out to me is when you look at employment stats,
Mm-hmm.
and you look at, so the stats show that men will apply for a job that they've got
Mm.
30% of the criteria for,
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
believing that they deserve the job. And women will apply for a job only if they've got 100% of the criteria and still believe that they are not worthy of the
Yeah.
job.
Yeah.
And it's like the most wild, like, consideration when you actually look at that, like, and you look at the general workforce and how men progress faster than women, you're like, well, it's clear why. Like, they have a much stronger belief that they are worthy of that progression and that they are worthy of being in that space. And I think, like, these are like all of the things when that self-confidence piece really like plays out in like the everyday lives of people. I think that it's such an interesting concept. And I guess, like, when you were going through your own journey, so obviously now you kind of work in the self-confidence space, which is absolutely incredible, but obviously you didn't all the way through your journey. Like, you were doing lots of other things as you were kind of coming to this point. Were there moments that you genuinely thought like you couldn't make this journey, like you couldn't get to the place, or was there always like a level of trust in yourself?
So, to answer that question, I'm going to rewind to when I was late teens, early 20s, and transitioning from kind of school to college to work. And so I studied music at college. I went to a music college. And one of the things that you have to do in your final year of music college is you do a recital, a performance recital. And so I recruited some friends to kind of play in the band for that. And and when I did my recital, um, no one came. It was a public recital. No one came. And the reason no one came is because I didn't tell anyone. Because I just kind of like I just was uncomfortable with the whole idea of like, oh, come and see me, it'll be amazing. And I remember like my at the guy that taught me drums when I was at college, who is still around actually, and I'm still in touch with. He kind of told me off afterwards, and he was like, "You should be telling people to come to these things. Of course, no one's going to come if you don't tell them." And blah 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 blah. And I was like, "Yeah, I know, but I just kind of like I was more comfortable just performing to no one." um, and so, just to give you an example of like that's kind of where my confidence was at that time. And when I first started teaching music, which is fairly soon after college, I was doing a mixture of playing and teaching and working in a music shop. And when I was first teaching, and this is true, I would actually, I was so afraid to just talk to another person and look somebody in the eye. I would send the children I was teaching who were like 10, 11 years old. I would send them to go to the school office to like ask for something, or can you photocopy this piece of paper, or can you go and fetch the next pupil from their lesson? Because I was just afraid of everyone and everything. Um, and so I think people who know me now might find that surprising. People that see some of the stuff that I do now, and kind of I'm really comfortable doing public speaking and sitting on panel discussions and doing debates, and I've done like live TV and live radio stuff, and I'm okay with all of that stuff. So the idea that I was once like would struggle to even just look somebody in the face or ask somebody if I could have the the code for the photocopier or something like that just seems bizarre. But I mean, one of the things that part of that journey as well um, is there was a time when, because of one of the other roles that I've got, I, part of it involved knocking on literally thousands of doors and having like cold calling kind of conversations with people. Um, and I used to knock on the door and just pray that no one answered. That was the honest truth of it, because it was like I would rather get nowhere than have to deal with speaking to people. Um, but actually, that process was totally transformational for me, because I kind of realized that, of course, yes, you get some people who are like, "Can you go away, please? I'm busy. I'm cooking the tea. I'm on night shift. You've just woken me up," or something less polite than that. But that's a really small proportion, and actually, the vast majority of people are really just nice and canny and friendly, and that was a really transformative experience for me. And I've subsequently talked to other people who were getting into that world that I was in, and they're like, "Oh, this you're good at this though. You're confident. You find this easy." And I was like, "You've got no idea. When I first started doing this, I was terrible." And why would it be any different? There's a radio presenter in the Northeast here, and he also does keynote speeches and stuff. A guy called Alfie Joey. He's a great impressionist as well, actually. And I heard him do a talk where he said, when you first start something, there's absolutely no reason you should be any good at it. And that's really struck a chord with me, because I thought, well, yeah, that's just like if somebody came to me back in the day wanting to learn to play the drums, and it was like lesson number one, I would absolutely not expect them to be good. It would be ridiculous to expect that. You know, if you had a child coming in for their first piano lesson, of course they don't know how to play. That's why they're there. But we kind of can be hard on ourselves and expect ourselves to be, if we've got an aspiration or an interest in something, we kind of expect somehow that we're just going to be able to do it, or if not straight away, like within the first couple of weeks. And of course, it takes years and years to develop skills and experience to become good at something, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so interesting because like I have a very similar like public speaking in school. I was the kid who would like throw up when I had
Right.
to stand in front of the class. Like literally it was like the worst experience of my life. And like again, like because of a job in my 20s, like ended up speaking in front of people and like learning this skill.
Mhm.
And so many people say the same thing to me. They're like, you've obviously never been scared to stand in front of an audience. And I'm like, you are mistaken. You are mistaken. But it's a skill. Like you have
Yeah,
to
it is.
learn it. You have to go through the process and, like get better at it and do the thing. And if you don't practice it,
Mhm.
it doesn't become something that you're good at, which I think is really, really interesting.
Well,
And
I
I
think
guess
there's,
like,
yeah, sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
no, 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 go.
No, I was just gonna say, so there's I think there's two parts of it. Like one is practicing and like understanding that practicing any skill or anything you want to get good at is just kind of a daily, well, it's a daily practice, isn't it? And so just knowing that in advance is useful. And having a practice, having a system whereby you are deliberately putting yourself through the reps and doing that
Hmm.
thing is useful. But the second part of that, I think, as well, is the proof that you get from doing that. Um, once you've gone and done a challenging thing, whether it's speaking in front of an audience or whatever it is, um, that's kind of like paying a deposit in the little self-belief bank, isn't it? Every time you step to the edge of your comfort zone and you survive and you come back and you're in one piece, you're like, oh, well, if I could do that, maybe I could do this other thing. And your world starts to then grow and expand. If when you get to that edge of your comfort zone, you just retreat back a little bit every time, then your world starts to contract a little bit. Um, and so you can either be practicing being brave, you can practice being, the confident person, the person who's willing to step to the edge of their comfort zone, or you can practice being the timid person that steps back. And what I know about the kind of the way this works in your brain is whatever you practice, you get good at doing, and it becomes easier and easier to do. And so that would
Hmm.
apply to the retreating from the edge of your comfort zone just as much as it applies to stepping to the edge of your comfort zone. And just to use a glib example, if every night I sit down, switch on the TV, open a bottle of wine and a bag of crisps, I'm going to get really good at doing that. if that's what I'm practicing every day. And what I won't realize is that if you're doing that day after day after day, after like a year, 2 years, 5 years, that's going to have an impact on you. Just like if you get in the habit of putting your trainers on in the morning and going out for a run, and then you practice that thing, that's going to have an impact on you, compounded over time as well. So it's kind of being intentional about what you're practicing and what you're getting good at, because all day, every day, we're telling ourselves how to think about ourselves. If that makes sense. All day, every day, we're
Yeah.
telling us how to think of ourselves. And I think that's a really powerful thing to kind of bear in mind as we sort of intentionally build habits that will serve us and release ones that won't.
Yeah, no, 100%. One of the things that always sticks with me is so I ran a marathon last year,
Amazing.
and there are so many moments where I will be trying to do something hard and I'm like, this can't be harder than running a marathon. Like, there's
Yeah.
absolutely no way this is harder. So, of course, I can do this because I did that thing. And like, I genuinely do. Like, when you do hard things, it
Mm.
genuinely rewires your brain.
Absolutely
Like,
does.
it
Absolutely does. Yeah.
changes,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, how you physically think about yourself and what you think is possible. And it is so funny because there are so many moments where I'm like, yeah, no, I ran a marathon. Like, I'm unstoppable now. Like, absolutely. I think that that's like, it's such an interesting, and I guess like, so my question to you then is like, what has been your biggest like outlook change on life? Like your biggest kind of shift in how you view life as you've kind of gone through, and it might not be one, there might be more than one, but like, what does this look like for you?
Well, you've made the fundamental mistake of mentioning running and marathons there, because like this is the classic thing of how do you know somebody's run a marathon? Well, they'll tell you. Is the
Yes, we will.
punchline. Um,
100%.
so now I'm immediately thinking about that. But you're right. So I think. So one of the many lessons I've learned through running um, is that my personal belief is that the training that you do for something like a marathon is at least as much about training your brain to believe that you can do it as it is about training your body. Um, I ran my first marathon a couple of years ago, and I don't consider myself to be a proper runner, if that makes sense. I've never been in a running club or anything like that. I've never had a running coach. Um, and so I started running 10 and a bit years ago, and I wanted to do a half marathon at the time. And I'd done half marathons pretty much one a year as an event, and then I would run that distance quite regularly. And then when I decided to run a marathon, I just thought, well, I'll just do I'll just make my long run a little bit longer each week. You know, that seems like a sensible thing. And because I was doing some other training, I only did like one real run a week. I know this is not how you're supposed to do it, but it's worked for me. And so I went from like 13 miles to then 15, 16, and then I was just kind of jumping up in 2 miles every week till I think the longest training run I did was 24 before the actual event itself. I thought, well, there's no way I got like 6 miles fitter in 3 weeks. It was just about realizing that what my brain could ask my body to do was more than I realized it was. You know, I would have assumed that I wouldn't be able to do it, and that I could prove to myself that I could. Um, I don't know if you're familiar with this model. There's this model called the emotional cycle of change, and it's like a little graph. And it starts with um, uninformed optimism, I believe, and then you get to the informed pessimism, and then at some point you get to the pit of despair, at which point most people give up and they start something shiny and new, because then they can feel the uninformed optimism again. I remember listening to a podcast about this when I was in the middle of a long run once, and I was like, oh, the emotional cycle of change is the same as the emotional cycle of doing a marathon, because you get to the pit of despair at about mile 20, and you're like, oh, there's 6 miles still to go. But you're right, because once you've done that, and I'm not saying everyone needs to go out and do a marathon, but you feel like, well, if I can do that, I can do anything. I can deal with discomfort. I can deal with pain. I can deal with being tired and emotional and all of that stuff. But the feeling of, if there was no resistance, it wouldn't be an achievement to finish it. You know what I mean? Like there's an old Jim Rohn quote where he says, if you took a football onto a field, an empty field, and kicked it between the goalposts, no one would be impressed. Because, where's the achievement there? The achievement is when you've got obstacles in the way and people trying to stop you, and you manage to score a goal. That's the bit that's impressive. And so I think it's kind of like the overcoming of obstacles is really a thing that helps us grow in all kinds of ways. But it's giving you that psychological proof that you are the kind of person who can overcome obstacles.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like that shift in outlook of I am the person who can
Mm,
versus I'm not sure if I can. I think that is such a game changer for people when you
mm,
actually, because a lot of people will not even try because they
mm,
assume that they can't.
mm,
So they will just start with the assumption that it won't be possible,
mm.
and then they'll never actually try the thing because they're like, well, what's the point in trying if it's never going to be possible?
Yeah.
And actually, when you do, as you said, no, you don't all have to go run a marathon, listeners. Don't worry, it's okay. But when you do anything that is hard for you, whatever that thing is, it shifts that dynamic of how your brain links with hard
Yeah.
things. So then you're like, oh, well, I tried this hard thing and then I managed to do it. So
Mm,
maybe there's other hard things that I could potentially do. And then that outlook change makes so much more possible because you're willing to try. I think
yeah.
like that is a really big shift for people as they're like going through the journey of figuring out like living a life that is genuinely aligned to who they want to be.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. I recently watched the podcast interview between Tony Robbins and Alex Hormozy. I don't know if you've seen it.
Hmm.
I was on a train, and honestly, I must have had like 7 or 8 pages of notes because I kept stopping it and trying to write stuff down because there was so much interesting stuff in that conversation. But one of the things that really stuck out to me, and I'll probably misremember it slightly, but Alex Hormozy said something, and Tony Robbins kind of picked up on it and said, "Well, when did you decide what kind of person you were? Like, how old were you when you made that decision?" And he went on to point out that most of us, if you've got a cell phone or a mobile phone, you've probably upgraded it in the last year or two. It would be unusual if you still had a phone from 5 years ago, 10 years ago, but you're carrying around all of the stories about who you are and what's appropriate for you and what you're capable of. Most of us are carrying those around from childhood, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, never mind upgrading them every year or two. And so I just thought that was fascinating. Like if you've inherited, because most of us have inherited from family, or we've learned and adopted things from other people, these limiting beliefs, or these beliefs about who we are and what's appropriate for us, what we're worthy of. You've kind of you're carrying that stuff around with you, but most of it is like, well, one, it's probably not true in the sense of like, objectively provably true, and it's probably not that some of it might not be that useful. It might not be serving us particularly well. And so there's a model I sometimes use with when I'm doing coaching, where if you imagine a matrix where you've got like useful, not useful, true, not true, you can be telling yourself a story that is not useful. And maybe it's not useful and true. Maybe it's not useful and not even really true. But either way, the key point is it's not useful. So it's better to tell yourself a story that's useful and true, or even useful and not objectively true. You can believe a thing that serves you to believe it. If I go into my day believing something amazing is going to happen today, that's not objectively provably true in terms of evidence and science. But my experience of my day is going to be better than if I've gone into my day telling myself something dreadful is going to happen to me today. Do you know what I mean? Like it's just a different expectation, isn't it? And just like the teacher that was told that the children that they were working with were exceptionally gifted and high potential children. If you're going into your day with that expectation that like something amazing is going to happen today, I'm so grateful to be alive, all that stuff. Like I don't want to be too over the top, but if you're going in with those kind of useful, empowering beliefs, that's a very different experience than starting every day like on a downer. And then whatever you're looking for, you're gonna find. So if you're looking for evidence that you're worthless and terrible and whatever, you'll find it. If I go through this process every day where I write down 5 wins at the end of the day, just 5 things that went well. And so it could be, let's see what was in the book from yesterday. So it can be like really simple things like I did a run, I went and spent some time in a coffee shop by myself, I listened to a really interesting podcast, um, I went and had a sauna and a swim, whatever it is, just however little or small it is. Um, I kind of record that stuff at the end of every day, just looking back over the day, things that have gone well. And that compounds over time because I'm now kind of going through my day. My radar's kind of looking for in the back of my mind subconsciously, oh, this is a thing that I might write down tonight when I'm writing down my wins. And so you're paying attention to that. And it's a bit like when, I don't know if you've ever done the experiment where someone says, yeah, I'm going to give you 60 seconds. Look around the room, and I want you to find as many things as you can that are the color green. And you like scan the room, and then it's like, okay, close your eyes, list all of the red things, and you're like, oh, I don't know, I wasn't looking for them, so I didn't really notice them. So you've got that kind of attention filter. If you're looking for those things, you're going to find them. And I always think, like, I've been doing that 5 wins thing for probably about 10 years. If I'd spent 10 years every day listing the 5 things that went wrong every day, like they're definitely there. I could do it. It's not like I'm kidding myself that everything's amazing all of the time. It's just that they're the things that I'm choosing to reinforce and place my attention on. You know, what's right is always available, and so what's wrong is always available as well. But if you chose to make a list every night of the things that went terribly wrong, by the end of a week, you're probably not going to feel amazing. By the end of a month, you're going to feel terrible. And by the end of 10 years, like, who would even want to be in the same room as you? Because you'll be so focused on all of that. And like, it's all there. It's all there in everyone's life. You know, everyone has good and bad stuff going on. But you can change your experience by where you place your attention.
Yeah, oh, 100%. And I think like so many people miss that. And I think one of my favorite experiments is or like understandings of this is things like when women get pregnant, like they won't have noticed a single pregnant woman around them, and then suddenly
Mm,
everybody is pregnant
mm,
because they that has now become a hyper focus for them as something
mm,
that's important. Or when you go out to buy a new car and you go to a car dealership and they're like, we have this brand new car, and you've never heard of it before,
mm,
never seen it on the road. And as soon as you buy it and drive it away, suddenly every second person drives one, and you're like, what? And it's like exactly that, where if you're not focusing on the thing, you just don't see it. It's just
yeah,
like your brain just filters it out because that's what our brains are built for. Like our brains are there to only show us the things that we deem important based on what we feed ourselves,
yeah, yeah,
because there's too many things. There's too many things to see and too many things to comprehend. And our brains physically can't process everything. So there has to be a hierarchy system. And if you feed into that hierarchy system, these are the important things, then it shifts how you perceive and how you see the world, which I
yeah.
think is just, it's so fascinating. I absolutely love the concept of this.
It is. And so I remember hearing someone say years ago, there's no such thing as reality. There's
Mm.
only perceived reality. And so at first I struggled with that a little bit. And then I thought, well, no, I get that actually, because if you've ever known two people that have been to the same place on holiday, and one of them will come back, like maybe they've been to Paris. I love Paris, so I've been there a bunch of times. And sometimes I'll hear people say, oh, I went to Paris. Yeah, wouldn't recommend it. Yes, it's dirty, it's busy, people are rude, the food's really overpriced, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, what? I've been to Paris. It's amazing. And you know, I could list you all the things that are amazing about going to Paris and going to the Rodin Museum and sitting in the Jardin de Luxembourg and seeing the Eiffel Tower lit up at night and just getting lost in little side streets in Montmartre and all this stuff. And it's like when you hear somebody who's had outwardly the same experience, they've been to the same place, they've seen the same things that you've seen. Um, but the problem is they took themselves with them when they went on holiday to Paris. And there's that old, I think it's an Anais Nin quote that you don't see the world as it is, you see the world as you are. And
Mhm.
the other one's the John Kabat-Zinn, wherever you go, there you are thing. Because, you know, you're the one person that you can never get that. This, I'm going to bring things full circle around to this self-belief. I've just figured out a way to do it. So wherever you go, there you are. And the one person that's always with you is you. So you might as well learn to like yourself along the way, because you're going to spend an awful lot of time with that one person, which is you. Um, you're the only person that sees everything you do. You know, there's
Mhm.
always someone watching, and that person is the most important person because it's you. You can't get away from yourself. So you see everything you do, you hear everything that you think in your head, and when you're doing that stuff, whatever actions you're taking, whatever habits you're building, whatever thoughts you're having, you're recording that. You're telling yourself how to think about you by what you're doing.
Mhm.
And so, you know, you might as well give yourself things that, you know, that make you feel good about yourself, whether it's that you did the difficult thing, whether it's that you stepped to the edge of your comfort zone, whether it's that you did something kind for a stranger, whatever it is, that's all like deposits in the self-belief bank, as I say. Um, and again, like at risk of getting too esoteric here, are you familiar with the map of consciousness thing? Yeah. So for anyone who isn't, they can look up maps of David Hawkins' map of consciousness. The levels of energy is a very similar thing as well. And when I first saw the map of consciousness, just to briefly explain for people that haven't seen this, at the bottom of the map, if you like, at the bottom of the diagram is things like shame and guilt and fear and anger. And when I first saw that chart, it was like really struck a chord with me because I thought, oh, okay, I used to live down there. That was my all day, every day. And as you get up the chart, you get to like courage and acceptance, and I can't remember all off the top of my head, but like, wisdom and love and all of these like more positive emotions. And I thought, I used to be doing things every day to feel ashamed of. I would be doing things every day that I wasn't proud of. And whether that's that you just take the easy option and rather than you have the difficult conversation with somebody, whether it's that you're supposed to make the phone call and you're like, I don't want to, it's uncomfortable. Whether it's that you know, for me, I'll be honest, one of the things that I've struggled with over the years is number one is food and number two is alcohol. And I would wake up the next day and I'd be like, I let myself down again. And so what the interesting thing for me with the map of consciousness is the thing in the middle that's the bridge between the lower emotions or the lower states and the higher ones. The thing in the middle is courage. And it's having the courage to make a different choice and to say to yourself, not anymore. This doesn't belong in my future. This isn't where I want to end up. And without getting religious about it, I don't consider myself to be a religious person, but I do consider myself to be a spiritual person. I don't necessarily think that I have no idea if there's life after death. But what I do know is that heaven and hell are states that you can experience in this life. And if you're down at the bottom of that chart, that looks a lot like being in hell. And I've seen people who, there's areas in my town that if I went to right now, there'd be people walking around like they are experiencing hell. No two ways about it. But it doesn't have to be like that, I don't think. And of course, most of those people have experienced trauma, and that's just how they are choosing to try and deal with it right now. And I used to choose unhealthy ways of dealing with it too. And I don't judge anyone for that, because there's the concept, the Maya Angelou thing of if they knew better, they would do better. And I don't mean that to be condescending, because that's the same for like my previous self. If I knew better 10 years ago, I would have dealt with things much better than I did. And like, that's fine. I've forgiven myself and moved on, because there's no sense beating myself up about it. But yeah, that chart, that map of consciousness thing was really key to me, just understanding that you don't have to stay down at the bottom of there in the guilt and the shame and the fear and the anger. You can make different choices.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think like that statement of like, if you knew better, you would do better. I like that is the healing journey.
Mm-hmm.
That is it. Like that is the point. Because it's exactly the same for me. I'm like, if I had known better 10, 15 years ago, I would be in a different situation than I am now. But I can't be cross with myself for not knowing, for not have experiencing, for not have, for not have learning, for not have reading the book at the time. Like you almost like can't jump stages of the process.
Yeah,
I think that
absolutely
becomes
can't.
part of the
No,
process.
yeah,
Like
it is.
you have to just go through the process.
Yeah, so the thing that I think some people might struggle with, including me 10 years ago, 20 years ago, um, there's this state that I kind of like found myself in of being grateful for everything, even the things that I labeled bad at the time. So we haven't gone into detail on any of this, and that's fine. Um, but like some of the things in my story, things like abuse, things like assault, things like sort of disordered eating and challenges with addiction and all of that stuff. In a way, I'm grateful that all of those things are part of my story because there's no I've learned things that I don't think I probably could have figured out any other way, really. It's in dealing with those challenges that you find who you really are, and you learn what's important, and you, in a way, part of it as well is learning that like they are things that I experienced. They're not who I am. You know, if if you looked at somebody's backstory there was like abuse and there was like I don't know debt and homelessness or addiction struggles or whatever, it would be easy to think that somebody who's experienced all of that would feel kind of like a victim or worthless or disempowered, and it would be totally understandable if they did.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't have to be a life sentence. Um, I don't want to sound like victim blaming because it definitely isn't.
Mm.
But you can choose to see yourself as a victim,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then that keeps you stuck and it keeps you
Yeah.
disempowered. So even if you have been victimized by somebody, which is definitely a thing that happens to people, that doesn't mean that you have to accept that label for yourself and make that into a life sentence. The past doesn't have to be a prison that keeps you stuck. It can be a school that teaches you and helps you grow. And
Yeah.
so I'm not, of course, I'm not suggesting that it's a positive thing for anyone to experience homelessness or addiction or abuse or whatever trauma it is. I'm just saying that I recognize that for myself, I've got a level of gratitude that I've lived through some of those things because I wouldn't be where I am now if I hadn't.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. In my journey and in this process, I feel exactly the same, where I'm like, I'm not I'm not grateful like that the bad thing happened, but I'm grateful for the person I became
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
of the thing that happened. And I
Yeah.
think like that idea of like being a victim versus having a victim mentality, those
Hmm.
are two
Hmm.
very, very different things, because
Absolutely.
there are people who, if you look at, there are famous people who have come from absolutely nothing, had the hardest upbringings, and have built massive fortunes for themselves. Or
Hmm.
like Simon Squibb, you always hear his story. He was
Hmm.
homeless at 15, kicked
Hmm.
out by his mum, and like now he is a multimillionaire and like gives loads of money away to good causes, and like all of these things. Like there are people who have absolutely had victim things happen to them but have not chosen the victim mentality and have made something for themselves. And I do think like there are times in the healing process where you need to step into that victim mentality and process those feelings in what it was and what
Hmm.
happened, and why it happened, and like you need to process through that. You can't just be like, oh, this thing happened and I'm just going to ignore it and just move
Hmm.
on with my life. Like
Yeah.
that's also not healthy. Like
No.
there's all of these different kind of nuances in it, but I do think, like you said, like it can't be a life sentence where you just sit down forever and
Hmm.
say, oh well, this one bad thing happened to me 20 years ago, so this is going to just dictate my whole life going forward.
Hmm.
There has to be an awareness of, well, actually I'm still in the driver's seat. And I think that that is the hardest shift for people, because being put into a victim state makes you feel like you're no longer driving the situation. Like that's
Hmm.
what's so dangerous about being made a victim. It makes you feel like you have less options and less choices, and less authority and autonomy in yourself. And actually, again, like part of the healing process is taking back all of those things,
Hmm.
is taking back that voice, that autonomy, that self-confidence, like that self-belief, like all of these pieces, and almost piecing them back together. But I
Hmm.
massively think through my own process, grief, loss, debt, like through all of these things, if it hadn't been for making those decisions and ending up in those places and learning from those situations, I wouldn't be who I am now. I wouldn't have what I have now. I wouldn't have achieved what I do now. This podcast wouldn't be a thing. Like there are so many things in the
Mm.
world that just wouldn't actually be true. And I think that that is a really, really important thing. And I guess like I always like to ask people, because like your shift has been, like from music teacher and
Hmm.
musician
Yeah, yeah,
to self-confidence
yeah,
coach,
yeah.
like on the other side of the spectrum. Like, was there like a moment that that shift was just like, oh yeah, of course this makes sense? Or like, how did that shift become a thing to where you
Hmm.
are now?
So I think probably where it started uh, was there was a couple of moments where I had to where I had to speak up essentially about things. So there's one that sticks in my mind, which was to do with when I felt that an injustice had happened to a person that was close to me, and I had to really well, I did stand up and literally stand up and say out loud what I thought about the situation. And I remember hearing somebody afterwards say, I never realized you had it in you. Because I would have been the person who would have like just, anything for a quiet life, avoid confrontation and blah, blah, blah. And and I thought, well, I'm not sure I realized I had it in me either, but now I do. Now I know that. And so there's like that's just one example that comes to mind, but like there's all sorts of things like that. And some of them seem significant and some of them might sound trivial almost, but there's been a process of overcoming challenges essentially, and each challenge that you overcome, I think, just helps build you up a little bit. Um, and and the bigger the challenge is, the more impactful it is when you overcome it. I'm not sure if
Yes,
that answers the question.
absolutely. Yeah, no, 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 absolutely. I think like it's always interesting for me from my kind of business background to see how people shift into that like new space of work
Hmm.
and kind of like do
Yeah,
something
sorry.
different and
That's what the
it's
question
always
was.
yeah.
So yeah, I guess like I've always been interested in coaching, and that came from when I was teaching, and I started to read some books about coaching. Um, the classic John Whitmore book uh, was one of them at that time, and I started to use that kind of coaching approach with young people that I was working with, and then as I got into kind of management roles, there was various courses I went on that were kind of coaching for managers, that kind of stuff. And then I did a coaching qualification a few years ago. And as I started to work with one-to-one clients, the first handful of clients that I worked with were business owners who were essentially trying to kind of deal with overwhelm and burnout. And as someone who had experienced burnout myself, I kind of had some lived experience of that as well. But then over time, people that would come for coaching in things like, career coaching, for example, or wrestling with time management issues and things like that. What I realized was that the underlying thing that I was hearing from people was even people that outwardly you wouldn't expect this of, was around like a lack of confidence or a lack of self-belief. And so the classic thing would be um, that people would say yes to everything and everyone because they felt like they needed to demonstrate that they were capable of doing all of the stuff, or they would struggle to delegate because then if they let go of stuff and they're no longer, everything doesn't have to come through them anymore, then where is their value, in that situation, and like all kinds of things. Or and often it was people that outwardly you would think of as being like extroverted people, larger than life people, but maybe actually that was just masking the fact that they didn't feel that. They're almost like they're overcompensating for how they really feel about themselves. And so they would struggle to say no to people, or they would take too much on and then feel burned out. Or they would be in a meeting and at the end of the meeting, they'd be thinking, why didn't I say that? Or, somebody else would come out with something. Somebody with a louder voice would say, oh, I think we should do XYZ thing. And they'd be sitting there thinking, I thought that 2 weeks ago and I just didn't say anything. It's that kind of thing that even people that seem like they're doing well on the outside sometimes struggle with that feeling of self-belief or confidence or self-worth. And so over time, it's just kind of like pivoted a little bit. And so that's kind of what I really started to dig into, because I knew that was something that I'd had a lot of experience with myself as well. I mean, technically, in coaching, there's a difference between coaching and mentoring. But I feel like I probably do a bit of both, if I'm honest, because I have wrestled with some of these things myself. But at the same time, it's about empowering the person that you're working with to kind of find their own path through and find their own solutions to the challenges that they're working with.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I love that. Okay, so my favorite question is always to ask people what advice they have for people. So if we've got listeners listening to us who are sitting here nodding along, being like, yeah, I fully feel this. Like I'm so stuck in this place of low self-confidence, maybe low self-belief. Like, what is your advice, recommendations? Like, how does somebody start to fix this?
Ooh, that's really interesting. So I think if I was going to give something valuable that people, something actionable that someone could actually go away and start to do, there's a few things that I think you can do almost as like daily practices. And as I say, like in my mind, we've already talked about kind of practice and proof a little bit. The thing that I would add to that is changing that perspective and understanding that self-belief isn't something that you have, or it's not who you are, it's a thing that you do. Yeah. And so being shy, uh, there's a set of like behaviors associated with that you could practice and get really good at. And I know because I did when I was younger. So there's a physicality that's associated with that. There's there's this kind of self-talk part of that, what you're telling yourself in your head. There's the things that you're paying attention to. And then the empowered version of you, again, there's a physicality that's associated with that. There's different self-talk and there's different practices, there's different habits. So some of the things that I would that I know work well for me and have worked well for clients that I've worked with. I'll just give you 2 or 3 kind of little quick daily things. One of them is every day I ask myself in my journal, what can I do today that demonstrates that I love, value, and respect myself? And I try and come up with 3 answers to that. And it can be like really small things, like just I'm going to take some time out today. I'm going to have a proper lunch break. I'm going to get outside. It could be whatever happens, I'm going to stop working at 6 p.m. and just have the rest of the evening off. It could be I'm going to have a bath or a sauna or whatever. Just like I'm going to do something nice for myself. I'm going to make some time for myself. I'm going to tell myself that I'm worthy of my own time, which is a big thing for busy, high-performing people that struggle with that. So that's one of the things I ask myself every day. What can I do today that shows that I love, value, and respect myself? We've already talked about the kind of recording some wins at the end of the day. So again, I write down 5 things that I think have gone well, or 5 things I've done well, or 5 things that I deem a success from the day. And then a third one would be, we've kind of touched on this through the conversation, is doing something every day that is stepping to the edge of your comfort zone. So doing something hard and coming out of the other side of it. And so again, that could be as simple as getting out and going for a run, or getting to the gym and training. I live near the beach here, so most days I go in the sea. And there's days where you really don't want to, like if it's January and it's dark outside and it's cold and windy, it's like not something you want to do, but you feel better for having done it. There's all the science about that I'll not go into, but when you've done something challenging, as you say, you're rewiring your brain day after day. And just as I said, what feels like hours ago now, when I was talking about practicing music, when you practice any skill, your brain literally changes. If you look at kind of imaging for the brain, there's a thing that happens called myelination, and it kind of insulates the neural pathways in the brain, and they start to fire quicker and all that stuff. It's fascinating, but you literally are changing your brain by doing those things. And if you can practice doing difficult things and you can practice overcoming challenges, you will get better and better at exactly that.
Oh, I love those. I love those. They're so practical. That is like, it's so incredible. And I think like a lot of people do find healing to be quite sort of wishy-washy and, oh, just meditate, journal, like, and actually it is these practical things. It is the physical act of changing the habit of who you are as a person that actually make the long-term difference. So I absolutely love those, and I hope that everyone will go away and give them a try, because I think that is really, really good. So final question then to wrap off the podcast, which is, what is your next level of healing? So what are you focusing on at this moment in your kind of own space of moving yourself forward?
It's a really interesting question. My next level of healing. I think there's a big difference between knowing something and living it, isn't there? And I've spent a lot of years gathering information and not necessarily applying it in my own life. I love reading, and so you can read all day long every day, but if you're not doing anything with that information, then it's not going to change anything. And I think for me, my next level of healing, I guess, is to take my own advice a bit more. And it's around like just being kind to myself. And whether that's to do with my self-talk or the expectations that I put on myself. I think there are different types of people in the world, and there are some people for whom resting and taking time out is not the thing that they need to do more of. Some people need to kick up the backside, and that's the thing that will help them. I'm not like that. I need somebody to tell me to slow down and to stop and to take some time out and be kind to myself. And that's probably the thing that I need to really get better at. I'm the kind of person where if I've got a day off, I'm fine till about midday, and then I'm like, I could just get that bit of work done. I could just answer some emails. So it's for me, it's learning to just step away and just be rather than do.
I love that. Yeah, I feel like that is such an important like part of the healing journey, because I do feel that, especially for people who are entrepreneurs and who are growing their own businesses and who are going through this process, like there's always something that we could be doing. There's always something, and because we love what we do and we're interested in what we do, we would quite happily do it all the time, but there is that balance that is needed. So I do think that that is really, really important. But it has been an absolute pleasure to have this conversation with you.
Oh, I've loved it.
As always, we will put links to be able to contact David in the show notes, so you'll be able to reach out to him and get in touch if you want to work with him or know more about his story, or just follow along on the excitement that is David's life now, which is always good. But thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story with us. It's been absolutely amazing.
No, thank you. I've loved it. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to another inspiring episode of the Diary of Discovery. If you found value in today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and share it with your friends, family, or anyone else you think might benefit from the stories of hope and transformation. Your feedback means the absolute world to us, so please take a moment to leave a review on your favourite podcast platform. Your reviews help us to reach even more listeners and continue to bring this meaningful content to the world. Until next time, remember, your healing journey is valid. You are never alone, and you have the strength to get through this. Keep shining bright, and we'll see you in the next episode of The Diary of Discovery.